Hi everyone, I'm Gladi Cologne.
And I'm Laura Hartman.
And you're watching Brand New Day on Be Well TV. Catch us here every Thursday for a brand new episode. Laura, today we are talking about finances.
Ooh.
Your favorite topic.
Definitely not my favorite topic.
Well, it's been a crazy financial roller coaster this past year for us, wouldn't you say?
100%.
Yes, and the biggest reason, the most obvious reason is because we both lost our jobs last year in the blink of an eye. We both come from a 2-income family household, so literally our finances cut in half.
Yes.
Or I should say our income cut in half last year.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's what people don't understand is that I think especially for career moms sometimes is we can be a little underestimated about maybe how much money we're bringing in. But I think we both are women, as a lot of the women and friends that we know, that we were holding our own. We worked hard for where we were at, and it was kind of a gut punch to see that paycheck go away.
And for so many it was overnight. For overnight, right?
Literally overnight,
So we had to kind of figure out what we were going to do. And so today we have a special guest who's going to be joining us to talk a little bit about financial planning, how to help anybody who is still furloughed or laid off, struggling, and maybe perhaps some new business or new entrepreneur advice. But before we introduce our guest, we thought maybe we'd talk a little bit about how we overcame what we went through last year. I know that in my household we had to make some adjustments. I think the same for you too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, it happened overnight. It wasn't something that we planned, where sometimes maybe you reach a point in your career where you say, you know what, I need to take a step back, especially if you have kids. A lot of moms reach a point where they say, you know what, now is time. I want to take a step back, be home with the kids, have a few years of that kind of life, and then jump into it when I'm ready. But you're planning ahead for that, where that wasn't the case with us. It was overnight, all of a sudden, 0 to 60, no paycheck. You're trying to figure out what to do with this, strict budget. At least in my house, there's a very strict budget of what's spent on whatever it is. And all of a sudden, it just kind of spiraled out the window.
Was there a major, I'm sure there was a lot of major adjustments, but was there something that directly impacted you? Something that you couldn't do anymore, buy anymore?
All of it, all of it. I was, I guess, fortunate that I had just done a little shopping splurge right before, and that had already been shipped, delivered, and tags off. So I had that to kind of cling on to and slowly stretch out what those new little pieces were. But other than that, it was all of those little, perks and luxuries that, number one, I think as girls, it makes you feel confident to be able to get your hair done and your nails done and shop and you go out for dinner with your husband or brunch and cocktails with your girlfriends. All of those little niceties in life are not just fun, but they can also, for career women, help with a lot of that mental health and knowing that, okay, I can splurge a little bit on me, treat myself to,
it's
those little niceties.
Confidence booster.
And I think also with my kids, it was, of course, they're not going to understand why life is different. So it's everything that I was spending. Obviously, that budget went totally away, and any little over and above that we could squeeze out went to the kids, because the boys, it's not fair for the boys to have had to not understand.
Them to know what's going on, or have to even try to explain it.
And it is hard to explain why we can't stop at ice cream as often, or why we can't go out to dinner, or why are we going to Disney every other weekend, Mom? It's hard to explain that, and so I tried to do what I could.
Now that we're both working, and so now kind of our incomes are back to the way that they should be, I still think that it was good to kind of go through what we went through, so now I can spend more responsibly. So if anything, I'm carrying that along with me into the future, because I'm like, okay, well, I went without it for a year. Do I really need to go back to whatever that thing was? I used to spend a lot of money on Red Bull. That was a terrible habit. Do I really need that one a day? Probably not. No. All kidding aside, though, like on a grand scale, we went a year without vacations. I know that sounds fickle, but we used to travel a lot, our family, and that's something that we did. And is it something that we have to do all the time? Probably not.
Right.
Is something we can pull back on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the hard part was we didn't know how long it was going to last.
Right.
So that was the really challenging part, was you're kind of in it, but we just saved every single penny we could get. And when the unemployment checks finally started to roll in, we all know what a nightmare that process was. We were very adamant about not spending those checks because we didn't know how long it was going to be. And so my husband was very much save it, put it away in an account, because we're not going to spend that on luxury items. We need to make do with his one salary and push forward, because there just was no awareness of when it was going to be over. So
well, and some people are still going through it. Some people are still struggling on furlough or having been laid off. So I think without further ado, we should bring in our special guest. I had to write his title down because it's a lengthy one, but we're so thrilled to welcome Mr. Todd Bryant to our show, fellow UCF alumni and founding partner and certified financial planner practitioner with Signature Wealth Advisors.
Good job.
Todd.
Yay, welcome.
Thank you for being so patient with us while we chatted, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, thank you. It's really a pleasure, and it's nice to be wearing a jacket for the first time in like a year and dressing up nice.
Yeah.
So I'm glad
Do
to be
you have
here.
the option of working remote?
Yes, I never would have thought that I would have had the option of working remote until last year, but it's been nice. It was a rough adjustment at first, like for everybody else, but it's been nice to be able to have that availability.
Nice.
That's great.
So you guys actually connected last year during all this craziness.
We did, and I think back to our previous guest, Shannon Orm, the power of LinkedIn, Todd and I are kind of a perfect example of how powerful that network is. Not only did we all three go to UCF, we also graduated the exact same year, yet, well, we knew each other, but we didn't know Todd. I'm sure we've been at a million football games, at the same football games, but it wasn't until we were put in this position and started H&F that he reached out and kind of said, hey, I see what you're doing and I kind of like it. I want to learn more about it. And from there, we just began a rapport and got on a Zoom call. I think it was probably my first Zoom call I had ever done outside of working, and just kind of connected on how he was marketing himself with his business. And Todd gave us some great ideas for how we could kind of kickstart getting featured in the media and just some really cool tricks. And that was really just a encouraging and motivational milestone for H&F. So thank you for that, because you really established some belief in what we were doing. And it was nice to know that, okay, we just kind of got this thing started, but somebody as prominent as you and what you do every day was taking notice of that. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yes,
what's your day-to-day like?
As you so eloquently put it, I am a certified financial planner practitioner with Signature Wealth Advisors. We are a group that is mostly UCF Knights. We kind of have a Gator or two sprinkled in there. But we work with individuals and helping them prepare financially for life's milestones. So milestones could be retirement, it could be selling a business, it could be starting a business, it could be getting a new job or losing a job, having a baby, buying a house. All of those different things involve finances and involves needing to have a pretty good grasp on what your money is doing and what you're doing. So we come into play to help people in those times that are going to be already challenging for multiple reasons on top of that. And if we can take away the burden of the finances, just like when Laura cringed when we said finances at the very beginning, that's what most people do. So I help to take away the
I didn't cringe because I manage that in my household.
Okay.
So her husband and I are very alike on that sense, because I have to manage it.
I have a spreadsheet I'm supposed to follow.
As long as one person's doing it, then you're usually okay.
Precisely.
A lot of people I meet with, like, the wife is like, I thought the husband was doing it. The husband's like, no, I thought you were doing it. It's like, okay, that's the first problem we need to deal with.
So that's our first piece of advice from Todd. Make sure one person in the household is managing the finances.
I established early on kind of who's the saver, who's the spender, you know, are you both of one or one of the other?
Spender.
Yeah, what's the
I'm
budget?
pointing at you,
Is there
Laura.
a budget? Is there a spreadsheet? If not, let's get that
Oh,
going
he
first.
made sure before we even got married. I remember him literally calling me and saying, we need to discuss who's going to be whatever. We had a legit conversation about it,
Nice.
and we moved forward, and yeah.
That's funny.
I tricked him, basically.
So, Todd, did you see an uptick in business last year from people in unique situations, such as being furloughed or laid off or starting a new business, needing your services?
Yeah, it was a crazy year for everybody, regardless of where they were at. For me, in March and April, this thing was originally like 2 weeks, and we just huddled for 2 weeks, and then it'll all be back to normal. And as it kept going, simultaneously, the stock market was tanking. And everybody knows that you should buy things when they're low and sell when they're high. And everybody says, oh, I know that, buy low, sell high. But when it's actually happening and you log in and you see your account is down 20, 25, 30%, and there's so many unknowns of what's going on, and you just might have lost your job, it's really hard to keep going and say, let me buy more at this point.
Oh, yeah.
And I had, in probably a 6-week or 8-week span, probably more Zoom meetings than I'd ever had before in my life, because I didn't really have any before that. But I just had back to back to back, like probably 8 to 10 Zoom meetings a day. And it was really just talking people off the ledge, reminding them what the long-term plan is, and whether you're, just started a business, you need to have the end in mind, what your goal is in mind, and financial planning is the same thing. What's the long-term plan? We know that things are going to happen. The market's going to have corrections and recessions and crashes from now between the time the three of us retire. We don't know why it's going to happen. We don't know how long it's going to last, but we know it's going to happen. So if we know it's going to happen, then we can plan for that and say, okay, this is just one of those times that we said it's going to come. It looks a lot different than we ever would have thought it would. But we can plan and not overreact to those types of things.
So now that we've kind of seen it run its course the way that it did, if in hindsight, let's say this hopefully doesn't happen again, in hindsight now from where you sit, what advice would you give for the person who just got furloughed, laid off? What are those first things that you need to do to make sure that you're protected? Other than don't freak out, but what are some of those critical steps that you need to take?
Yeah, one of the first things, whether furloughed, laid off or not, is having an emergency fund. So you need to have that money just sitting in cash. Right now, as of today, the best rates on cash are going to be maybe 0.5% if you're lucky. Knowing that it's not earning you much, but you have to have that there. And I always recommend 6 months of your bills in the bank. Now, if you are a small business owner, that number needs to be more like a year worth. Because of the fact that we just know things are going to occur, and you have to have that sitting there. So hopefully for the people that were impacted, that were able to withstand it, like you guys did, that there was the money in the reserves to say, okay, we still don't know how long this is going to last. There's a ton of unknowns, but this is why we have this money sitting here. That we didn't go out and spend on Amazon or Red Bull or something else like that. One of our sponsors after today.
I disconnected PayPal right away.
So the first is that. Second is to kind of take a look at where you are, with your group benefits. Because for the ones that were actually laid off, a lot of people rely on work for their benefits. So their life insurance and their 401k and disability insurance and a lot of those things, and health insurance. So it's important at that point to say, do I have anything outside of work? Because we've also heard the adage, don't put all your eggs in one basket. You want to have diversification. You don't want to have everything tied just to work, because you could potentially leave jobs or lose your job, or the company could not. You could keep your job, but maybe the company's not doing so hot, and they need to reduce the benefits and cut back the benefits, and then you lose those benefits anyway. So I always recommend to people to take a look at what you have, and then see what is available outside of that, and work with outside professionals to help to secure some of those things.
Now, have you been working with a lot of individuals on 401k rollovers? Has that been a big piece of this whole, I guess, issue? Because I know that's definitely for the folks that were officially laid off, if your 401k or if you had a 401k with your existing company, now it's kind of, well, now what do I do with that? I think that's been a big question a lot of people have been wondering or paused on because they're just not sure what to do.
Yeah, it was definitely that was a large part of my business from last year. Because now if they're furloughed, that's different. But if they were laid off, the CARES Act came out last year, and it was an exception to be able to take money out of your 401k plan if you're under age 59 and a half, and you could pay it back over several years if you wanted to, and there's no penalty to do that. So I had several clients that took advantage of that otherwise they'd be looking at a 10% penalty plus owe taxes on it if they were just to take the money out pre age 59 and a half. So that was a great tool to be able to allow people to access that 401k money without that. But it was also a good time for people to look at, how is my money being invested, and do I maybe need to make some changes just with the allocations of that. 401ks are great, especially when there's a match. But if you're not working there anymore and there's no match anymore, you're limited on the investment choices, and you'll have much more flexibility with an IRA. Everybody's situation is different, of course, but for a lot of people that made sense to move to an IRA, individual retirement account, that they could have more options with how they manage that money.
So at that point, it's kind of closing it up, finding a financial planner that you're comfortable with, and like yourself, and walking you through that process of moving that money over to where it's going to grow better.
Yeah, and hopefully grow better, but also just you have more options on how it can be invested and how you can manage that money.
Right.
And not just sit there with not just sit there anymore. I think that's kind of part of the closure when you're leaving a job, is kind of totally cutting those ties and those connections with that company altogether, is taking that money and moving it out of there,
that was
and
one of the last
getting
things I needed to do.
Yeah, getting their getting their name off of it and taking it somewhere that you've got more flexibility with it.
Yeah.
Did it make you cringe a little bit with the CARES Act, where suddenly now people have the option to dip into their 401k, even though it was beneficial for people? I can't imagine the kind of the opposing feelings you might have had of, oh my gosh, we tell everybody all the time, you don't touch that money, and now people were given a free pass to do so.
Yeah.
And now you're advising people possibly that really need it, that it could be an option. So I can't imagine that being, I can only imagine that being a really odd conversation for you to suddenly be having.
Yeah, January 1st of last year, I wasn't planning on having that conversation. There was no such thing as a PPP loan, which I helped several of my clients with securing, even though that had really nothing to do with me. But it had to do with their wealth, which has to do with me.
Right.
So a lot of these things that none of us knew about in January became normal parts of it last year.
Yeah.
And anytime people can get an out and have a reason to be able to touch stuff, then we need to make sure we have a careful conversation with how we want to best utilize that. But I had a very good client of mine. I said they needed money for something, and I said, here, you can use this because of the CARES Act. Took it to the CPA. The CPA said, no, you can't do that. And we're going back and forth, and I'm like, okay, here's the IRS articles from the website. And just the other day I saw him, and he's like, thank God you told me about that, because that really was able to put us in a much better situation. And my CPA said, literally, this guy's wrong. So it's hard to find really good advice out there, and you can Google a bunch of stuff, but we all know the potential errors that can occur from that.
Or you can end up with too many options.
And what's the alternative? So let's say you are a single income household that's now been put in this position, and you don't have that other spouse's fallback. We were lucky to at least have one other person that had a paycheck to just kind of change our spending, change our budget around. But for those that weren't in that position or aren't in that position, now what's the alternative? You have this money, hopefully, in a 401k that you are now allowed to access, versus building a bunch of debt, which is all you're doing now is building a big hole for yourself that you don't even have the money to pay off. So it's kind of like, oh, not ideal to dip into that savings that I wanted for retirement, but might as well use it because you have it, versus building that hole. So.
Well, so let's transition up and talk a little bit about new businesses and change the conversation a little bit about entrepreneurs, because a lot of entrepreneurs, especially ones that developed out of last year, really didn't know what they were doing from a financial standpoint, and were kind of just learning as they go. So were there some common pitfalls or one common pitfall that you saw any business owners making that you can share with us and possibly prevent anybody who's watching this from avoiding any of those new business pitfalls?
Yeah, I think one of them goes back to what I mentioned before about the emergency fund, having enough in reserves and savings. And with the new business, and I've had several clients that they get really good at what they're doing for this company, and they're like, you know what, I could do a better job if I just went off on my own and did my own thing. And they need to have those reserves and the cash there. And they also need to know what the end goal is and what are they trying to get to, and do they want to basically, do they want to grow and sell to one of their competitors at some point? Do they want to pass it down to the next generation within their family? Do they want to try to partner with other people? So I know it's hard when you're in the trenches early on and revenue's not coming in and there's a ton of expenses and just trying to find them, because I've been there myself with my business. But you always have to know, here's the end goal of what we're trying to achieve. Here's some of our short, mid, and long-term goals, and just always thinking long-term. And like when the market crashed last year, thinking about the long-term, not making short-term decisions based on an account or something that should be long-term as well.
Well, and you were mentioning earlier, so, the 6-month reserve for individually or for your household, but more of a year for a small business. And I think it's all about perspective, because some of these businesses that are just starting off the ground, and certainly a lot of our H&F innovators, you have to really think about what those true operating expenses really are. It's a year of reserve sounds like a lot, but if you look at, a company like ours, I mean, our bills are very, very light because it's very, very minimal. Or it maybe you've got an Etsy store, or maybe you're a service as a photographer, or it doesn't necessarily mean that you've got to have these huge, huge reserve. That a dollar amount might not be as big as a year sounds. When you're just starting up and maybe you have a niche service or skill, that it really comes down to the talent that you have that you're offering. So I think it's something, for people to remember to put into perspective, is don't get so hung up on hearing, oh my gosh, I'm never going to have a year's worth of that. That number might not be as daunting as you might think, depending on what you're doing.
Yeah, it's different for everyone.
And I think that's been especially true this past year, because we can speak to that with the majority of our H&F innovators. The companies or the brands they've started are so niche, they're so specific to their personal skill or their personal service that they just have a talent. They're offering a service, they're offering a specialty that maybe was a side hustle before, but not necessarily something that has a lot of overhead to continue to maintain. So all about the perspective, I think.
Yeah. Do you recommend, when you're starting a business, start outlining your own kind of budget for yourself, for your business, or what kind of advice can you give on that?
Yeah, definitely. And even with my own business, I have my personal budget for our family, but then I also have the financially, from the business standpoint, here's the list of things that need to get paid for from a business standpoint. And I think it is important to have both of those things in mind and say, okay, my family, for us to eat and pay our mortgage, we need this. That needs to come from this. And then if we have employees and other things, I think what a lot of people have learned from all of this, even myself included, is that you probably had a lot of other overhead that you didn't necessarily need. I think now it's even easier than ever to be able to start a business from home or start something online and do something like what you guys have done and build a brand without having to dump a ton of money into it up front. And even myself, I save about $400 to $500 a month between not having to pay for parking spots, 2 parking spots in downtown Orlando, and gas and tolls to be driving downtown every day. So I never would have thought I didn't have to pay for those things. I paid for them for about 12 years. And then now I realize, I didn't need to do that.
The office spaces, everything to turn the lights on, even just an office space alone, is cut that out. And if everyone's working remote, or that's such a great point, just parking spots alone, cut that out. And you definitely realize this year how much leaner you can live personally and operate professionally and still be happier. And I think that's probably one of the best morals of the story is probably the entire world needed a little dose of that, I think, is knowing that we can survive on less, still be happier. And a lot of sense, so many people are even happier than they were because some of these circumstances are different. Working from home, I'm sure it's a much better commute for your family to roll out of your home office and maybe help go get dinner or get the kids or whatever that might be. That all of those little, streamlining everything has really been for the better and creating better habits for the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually did a little speech about good things that have come from all of this, and I kind of went back and did some rough numbers. And I realized last year, in a regular year, on a weekdays, not including the weekends, I would have had lunch with my family. I've got a wife and 2 little kids, about 50 times in the year. And then I went back and looked at last year, and I had lunch with the family 180 times.
Wow.
So
that's incredible.
That never would have happened unless I would have, basically quit my job. That wouldn't have happened in any other scenario. So I think out of all the bad things we hear about this, there's stories from families and from your business and other things out there that good did come from this. And I think it all came about pivoting. And when you get that notice that you got furloughed or laid off, you can kind of sit around for like a day or two feeling sorry for yourself, but then you just got to get back on your butt and do something about it.
You
so
do.
I think that it was a good opportunity for people to really learn and grow and be in a better place now than they might have been before.
And you talked about earlier even just diversifying your money, of course, but it's also diversifying your skills and what are those transitional skills and what other things can you do as an individual that is not so focused on just this one business or one career path that you might have followed. And I think you're a great example of that because yes, you're a financial planner, but you're not just a financial planner that's in his office all day, takes his calls, clocks out, and goes. You are very big on social media. Obviously, you're on a show today. I see you on podcasts all the time. You've been in, big magazines like Orlando Magazine. You've had a lot of really big promotional type of interviews done on you, and I know that's not without some type of strategy. And I think we were talking before the show, you have a marketing background or degree from college, and you're a great example of somebody who has connected those dots to be able to understand it's not just about this one job that I'm doing. Right. I've got to really pull in all of my skills because you never know when a pandemic or something's going to happen, what else can I do? And not the financial planning is going to go away, but you could very clearly probably shift and do some other things, with your social media presence and your speaking engagements that you do, and not having everything in one basket. And that's why for us having H&F has been just such a blessing because I personally feel that, okay, if something happened again and I was to lose my job again, we've built something now to then keep pushing forward on and continue to build, and just having that peace of mind that there's more to life than just this one thing that you were maybe following for a long time.
I totally agree with you on that. Definitely one of my big takeaways from this past year. So you did a recent speaking engagement.
You did. Kind of a big one, too.
Yeah, at UCF.
Yes.
And this was a commencement ceremony. This is a graduation ceremony that you were speaking at. And I know that a lot of times you try to give advice to the people that are listening to you, the graduates, here's the future. So what was one piece of advice that you shared with them that you can share with our audience today?
Yeah, thank you. I actually got an invite to do the 2020 commencement.
Okay.
Spring 2020, which was, I probably got an email like first weekend of March last year.
Yeah.
And I got all excited and told my wife, my mom, and some other people. And then like the next day, I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't going to happen. They're going to cancel it. And then like a week later, I got an email saying it was canceled. We'll keep you in mind for future years. So this March, got the email again. I was like, oh, thank goodness they remembered me. They thought of me.
That's
I
great.
Instantly started writing down some notes. What am I going to talk about? What am I going to say? And then they said, oh, no, we're giving you a script.
Okay.
And I said, oh, okay, that's not what it was planned. And then So they said, but the president of the school is going to introduce you. So it's like, okay, well, how long do you want my introduction to be? I'll start writing out a nice introduction. Like, no, they're just going to say, Todd Bryant, class 2007. I was like, okay, all right. So I was able to check one of my big bucket list items off my list, which was speak at a commencement for the second largest university.
Awesome.
I was actually thinking too small. I was thinking my high school would be cool, but then when UCF called, I was like, oh, I kind of stepped over my high school.
That's very
We need to get on the UCF list then.
I know, but it's still on my list because it wasn't the keynote speech where I was able to really give my own like 10, 15 minutes.
There's still more in there that you didn't get out.
Yeah, there's still more in there, but it was a really cool experience. Even with the social distancing, there was still a lot of people there. It was I guess it was a half full arena that was just spread out, so there's people everywhere. But I was able to talk about just being an alumni and how important it was to me, and now that they, literally that day they became alumni, so now you need to get involved and do a lot of things that we've done and start networking and getting to know people and giving back to your university. And it's done so much for me that we might not have, if we would have gone to different universities, maybe we might not have connected on the same level that we do now.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's such a great message, and you're the perfect person to deliver that, because I really feel like you walk the walk of that message. But just, we were even chatting before, I mean, every single job we've had has been through our network, through who we've known, and I think coming off of graduation right now, that's such an important time for those college graduates, even the high school graduates. It's never too early to start, and I feel like especially now they've got to get going on what this career journey is going to be, because the next 4 years is going to go by quick. But working your network while you're in college, communicating, collaborating with your professors, your peers, being involved, like Todd was saying, because when you come out of it, that's not the time to say, all right, now what? Now here's this world. You need to know people in the world. You need to know people in the industry, and you need to have proven yourself. So absolutely. Definitely just really cool that you got to do that, and at the same time also see that you're still doing that to little old us who didn't know we needed it, and here we are. So
too funny. Well, Todd, thank you so much for being here. We are running short on time, but congratulations on checking that off your bucket list. That's an awesome opportunity, and we look forward for you to being the keynote for another commencement ceremony, and we'll watch you. But thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your advice with us. And just thank you for being a great partner.
And how can our audience get in touch with you? If they need financial advice for whatever reason, how can they get in touch with you?
And you can look right there into the camera.
We talked a lot about LinkedIn, and this is a longer story, so I'm not going to tell it now. I'm going to save it for my second appearance.
Okay.
But if you go to theoriginaltoddfather.com, that'll link you to my LinkedIn page, and LinkedIn is the best way to connect with me.
There you go.
Theoriginaltoddfather.com, and then my business website is signaturewa.com.
There you go.
Thank you, Todd.
Thanks again for being here. And we will have another appearance, so we'll have to get that scheduled, because lots to discuss in the financial world for sure. So thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you have a brand new day and get your finances in order. We'll help you.